Good evening, everyone. I'm PJ O'Neill, serving as Branch Chief for STEM Training in the Student Programs Directorate. Welcome to this month's Tech Talk, Lessons on Leadership. Tech Talks are sponsored by the U.S. Coast Guard, Coast Guard Auxiliary, and the Boy Scouts of America Sea Scouts program. Tech Talks are held on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 2100 hours Eastern. This is the last Tech Talk of 2024, taking off in December. So our next Tech Talk will be on January 28th, 2025. Just a reminder, this Tech Talk is being recorded and it's posted to both the Sea Scout and Aux Scout YouTube channels. Please subscribe to the YouTube channels and share with your shipmates that could not join us tonight. The recorded Tech Talks make for excellent training for your Sea Scout ship or auxiliary flotilla. So please like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the excellent, high-quality, on-demand training. If you have questions during the Tech Talk, please type them in the Q&A box down below, and we will address the questions at the end of the presentation. Now I'd like to introduce tonight's subject matter expert. Commodore Dale Fajardo joined the auxiliary in 2010. He has been elected Flotilla Commander 4 times, a Division Vice Commander twice, Division Commander, and District Captain Prevention for District 11 North. On national staff, he served and completed a tour as a member of the Auxiliary National Executive Staff as the Assistant National Commodore, known as an ANACO, for the Force Readiness Command, ANACO-FORCECOM, responsible for 3 national directorates: Human Resources, Public Affairs, and Training. Currently, he is the President and CEO of the Auxiliary Association. On the prevention side, he holds the Auxiliary Marine Safety Trident device and is a commercial fishing vessel safety examiner. For response, he is qualified as boat crew and as a telecommunications operator. Professionally, he is the Vice President for Education for the American Academy of Ophthalmology and leads the Academy's clinical education, professional development, and publication programs. Commodore Fajardo holds a Bachelor of Science from the United States Naval Academy, a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Hawaii, and a Doctor of Education from the University of Southern California. During his free time, he enjoys being on the water, preferably under sail, going on air with amateur radio, listening to jazz, and traveling to Hawaii and many other interesting places with his wife. It's my pleasure to turn over lessons in leadership to Commodore Fajardo.
Well, thank you, PJ, and so glad to be out here to meet everyone virtually. And my presentation today is on working with volunteers across generations. And one of the things we need to know as members of a volunteer organization is understanding how others look at the world, and maybe one way to look at it is to look at the various generations that we all belong to. So without further ado, I'd like to start the presentation here. And one of the things we need to understand is that we need to know how to make sure we motivate our auxiliary members across all generations to support the mission of the auxiliary as for at least for us, the civilian uniform counterpart of the United States Coast Guard. And that's one of the things we all could use, I think, in our daily lives. And through this presentation, I hope you'll be able to see some opportunities to take this back to your respective organizations. Now, I took this image here from Wikipedia, and it just shows the different generations. What do we mean by generations? Well, it talks about when we were born. And for example, I'm part of Generation X. My birth year is between 1965 to 1980. There are people out there who are baby boomers, born before me, and people who were born after me in groups called the Millennials, Generation Z, and Generation Alpha. So this is one perspective how one group looks at it. Before the baby boomers, there's a silent generation. Before that was the greatest generation, and you hear the word greatest generation related to people who served, let's say, in World War II, one of the great, unfortunately, world wars that people had to go through. And before that, if you were born, let's say, in 1883, I think there were 20 people on the call from that time, they're part of the lost generation. So this is how at least some sociologists look at how the world works. So normally during this presentation, I like to focus on these groups. When I give my presentation to I've given my presentation to other folks, and even let's say to my local district, District 11 North. And PJ, thank you for the very nice overview of my world. I ask people to take a look at what cohort do you belong to. So as you're on this call, take a look and see where do you fit, because I'm going to be asking you some questions to think about as we move forward here. So again, I'm part of Generation X. I was born at the end of the 1960s, and there might be others from the different groups here. So specifically, now you know where you're at. Think about the characteristics and values of your respective generation. Uh, how do you like to receive communication? How do you like to receive your information? What do you think are typical myths and stereotypes associated with your generation? And let's say in this case, if you're part of the auxiliary, what are the requirements for a good auxiliary experience? If you're part of the Sea Scouts, what do you think would be required to make sure people want to stay in the Sea Scouts? And what would you expect to see? And what would you want to see from others? But also, how would you want others to treat you? Again, these are the generational cohorts. So think about that again. Figure out where you're at. And now what we normally do is we do a group feedback discussion. And what we want to do is have others meet together and talk about, where do you fit into the group. And I'm going to see if I can even open, I don't know if I can even open up the chat here, but what we'll do is sometimes we'll ask for people to give feedback. But think about, take some notes and think about where you would fit. So, for example, if you're part of the silent generation, if everyone's watching from this, again, we don't want to make stereotypes about people, but at least some would say that the silent generation, I would say, let's say sociologists would say they were shaped by the Great Depression. If people know what the Great Depression is, I know a number of people are very far away from that, decades away from when the Great Depression happened. That was in the 1930s. They were shaped by World War II. Concept of radio, when people wanted to only listen to radio, they only could watch movies. They didn't have TV back then. Some characteristics are that they are relatively successful. They're considerate and inclusive. In terms of being a mentor, they're quiet but industrious. They work really hard behind the scenes. There's a sense of caution, being cautious, and at times the reason why they're called the silent generation is because they're in between two, let's say, generations with more, that might have more recognition per se. So there might be a feeling that this group might feel underestimated and overlooked. Values associated with this group: self-reliant, thriftiness. That means they want to save money. There's a lot of hard work. It appears that they're quite disciplined, a lot of dedication, and a good amount of loyalty. And that would probably translate to making sure that they have a good, strong family and community within this group. So again, something to think about from the silent generation. I know people from this group, and it seems like this somewhat covers them quite well. So if you're part of the silent generation of this call, uh, do these make sense to you? So let's go to the next group, the boomers, the baby boomers, as they call it. This is a group that was shaped by the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, Watergate. If you heard about Watergate and all these big stories back then, they tend to be quite independent, well educated. They like quality. They're not afraid to question authority in a number of circles, and they like to have a cause to focus in on. Supposedly they like to be fit, and there's a sense of resourcefulness there. Again, the values associated with this group are work, personal gratification, a little bit more focus on themselves. What's WIIFM means, what's in it for me, with regards to how they interact with the world. Again, I talk about being fitness conscious. There's a sense of health and youthfulness, and maybe a little bit of competition there. So, do these make sense to you if you're part of this generation, or if you know people in this group who are born during this time frame? Are these relatively accurate descriptions for these folks? Generation X. So this is my generation. We were supposedly shaped by the AIDS epidemic, Berlin Wall, the dot-com bubble, when all these tech companies, they got really big. A couple decades ago, now they went downhill. Were we affected by that? We're supposedly self-reliant and survivors. We all go through different challenges in our life. I think I've had my share in good ways, and I think I've been able to successfully make it through. Are we serious about life? I think I am. My wife, my better half, would tend to say so. Do we get stressed out? Some of us are. I'm pretty. And I know I can be a pretty intense person there. So, do we get stressed out? Some might say yes. Some, it depends. Are we loyal with our relationships with others? Again, it depends who you are. Not everyone's always loyal, but I think I'm pretty loyal. I've been married for 2 decades, almost come to 3 decades. Skeptical. And sometimes we're not afraid to ask questions, be skeptical, and are we highly spiritual? And that's between everyone, between who we believe in and such. But I feel like I have I do stuff on every Sunday. So I think there's maybe a sense of that in my world. Again, values, diversity, thinking globally. Um, are we balanced? Are we literate? Technology. I feel like I'm relatively literate in technology, and fun and informal. At least I like to have fun. I think most everyone does. Maybe some people don't. Maybe if you're part of Generation X, maybe you don't like to have fun. But I sure hope you do. So this is the generation that I belong to, and for me, it feels like it's a relative, pretty, accurate description of way I look at things. So that works. Then as we move forward, the next generation is Generation Y, also known as millennials, people who were born between 81 to 2000. They were shaped by Columbine, 9/11. I remember 9/11 pretty well too. So, but for maybe this group, maybe more so than me. And the internet. That was when the internet came out in the 1990s, when it started getting really big. That's the time when they started seeing it. Again, ambitious, but they want to have guidance. So one characteristic, individualistic, but also group oriented. Almost a little dichotomy here, right? Between what they think, what they don't think. Short attention span, supposedly. Overscheduled, very busy. They're optimistic, idealistic, which is great. And multitaskers, being able to do multiple things at once. Here, you can see this. Even this image here shows some of supposedly millennials who are quite, maybe multitaskers. They value civil engagement, education is important, confident in like achievement, a sense of diversity and technology. So this is the group. So Generation X seems to start becoming technically literate, but Gen Y has been more so than let's say folks like me, right? And then as we move forward from Generation Y to Generation Z, also known as the boomers, folks who were born after 2001, characteristics again, life after 9/11, the Great Recession when things went downhill not too long ago, and then these folks are familiar with technology from a very young age. The Gen Z, independent, self-confident, which is good, autonomous. Supposedly, there's a shorter attention span, and the 8-second filters. What do we mean by that? And in the work I do in my day job, we want to make sure that at least when I send information out, that it's good information in a very short time frame. Because supposedly, folks in this group, if you don't catch their attention within 8 seconds, if you don't have high quality content in that time frame, you'll lose these folks. Again, not to be stereotypical, but you need to make sure you have some good information that you can present within 8 seconds. And again, something to think about. The work I do, we tend to send out short bits of content. We're leveraging Instagram and other channels, and we're getting a lot of uptake because of that. Because we try to make sure they have high quality content within a short time frame. And one of the things that's really cool about Gen Z is they're able to differentiate stuff very quickly. And the point about rapid fire communications too, they're able to understand and text very quickly and work within different environments, and then be able to multitask even more so than others, because they have to be able to be what they always say facile or very competent with technology. Values for this group: being entrepreneurial, again loyalty, they expect it, again diversity on a global perspective, and then again take technology to the next level with this group. They're very technically oriented. And then there's another group called Generation Alpha, but for the sake of this discussion, we're going to stay with these groups here. And and then here's a table. You don't have to read it all, but this is how one way to look at it is, what's the motivation to volunteer? What we look at are millennials, Generation X, baby boomer silence, and then hindrance to volunteering. So one of the things that we talked about is how do we get folks interested from each of these groups to be part of your world if you want to be a volunteer in your organization. Again, what's the motivation to continue to be volunteers? How actions can take, who to improve and continue to volunteerism. Most important factors to maintain volunteers. What we'll do is we'll actually go through some of the other slides that talk about these concepts and that actually show ways to reach out to folks. So you can take a look here. Let's take an example. Let's say we deal with the baby boomers. And, for example, here is actions volunteer, the fourth row, actions that volunteer professionals can change to improve to continue volunteerism. So what that means is like, well, for baby boomers, maybe we should make sure we appreciate them, tell them that we appreciate their efforts and ways to, make sure we have clear communications. There are some areas that have a lot of common threads here, but at the same time, what are the challenges that some people would face? So this is an example of a table that one can look at and focus on. So let's go to the next slide, and we can see how we want to, let's say, approach the silent generation. If we still have some folks from that generation, what we want to do is continue to focus on their skills, experiences, and legacy. The fact that they should feel that they're being needed. They're understanding that there's an opportunity for altruism, doing nice things for others. Socialization is important. Giving folks a chance to network, because as I talk to people from this generation, less and less of them are around, right? They're not as many of people around here, so it's still important to network and finding good projects that are worthwhile and satisfaction of a job well done. I know auxiliaries. I know some who are in their 90s right now, if you can believe that, over 90 years old, and they love what they're doing, and they have a chance to socialize and be part of a group. So the boomers, again, the sense of altruism, addressing a need. If you want to deal with baby boomers, the boomers really, focus on the work that needs to be done. Find maybe another career of sorts for them to continue to grasp onto. Again, we also need to consider their skills and interests because they have a lot of skills, many years of expertise. So don't be afraid to ask a boomer of a specific generation to tap into their skills because they have a lot of information to share. And it's important to also let folks know, with anyone too, how are they making unique differences? Not maybe specifically to boomers, but for everyone you deal with. These are some good concepts that are applicable to everywhere we go. And making sure folks have a sense of accomplishment and find personal meaning in what they do. I think if we want to be part of an organization, we want to make sure we feel like we have a sense of accomplishment. We achieve different levels of, let's say, expertise or, congratulations, or even showing that we have some type of qualification per se. That's a sense of accomplishment. And hopefully that means something when you're able to put it to good use. Okay, Generation X. So supposedly for folks like me, we want an environment that's comfortable, flexible roles, scheduling, and and so forth. The issue is like for me, I'm quite busy. We're all busy here, but for my world, I'm extremely busy. Just before I was trying to deal with some working. We're working on our house. I had to meet a number of people at my place. From even my day job, too busy with other things. So I want flexibility for my life. I want to be do something meaningful, and I think my work with the Coast Guard Auxiliary is quite meaningful. Also, being an auxiliarist, I have a level of independence that I could volunteer to do something, but if I can't make an event, well, I'm a volunteer, so I may not have to be there that day, but I try to be. I don't like to deal with hassles in my environment. Hassle-free is important. I don't want to have to cut through a lot of red tape. Technology, I'm pretty decent with technology. I know technology relatively well, so I like to have technology-centered tasks. Even when I volunteer with the Coast Guard itself, I'm doing work with a local cutter here. I help them with the technology, and I'm a generation ahead. Most everyone in there, I'm either one or two generations ahead of them, but I'm still able to do technology and help them, let's say, with their Wi-Fi system on board the cutter. Um, be able to communicate frequently. I like to get communications to know what's going on. I always like to be kept up to date. Again, sense of accomplishment, like the other generations. I like to see that too. And for us, we like to hear positive words. In my world, I like to say on my team, hey, thank you for a great job with that. I really appreciate that you were able to do X, Y, and Z. At least when you give praise to people, you also want to tell them why you're giving the praise. Saying thank you is great, but what's even better is to explain why they did a great job. And this is something that you could do when you become a leader. If you're, of a earlier generation and you're not in a leadership role, or as you're getting leadership roles, you want to make sure you thank someone and be specific as to why you're thanking them. I could always do a better job with that too. Generation Y. So this group here, one suggested approach is give them more responsibility and provide leadership roles for folks in this group. Having them work with others is a great idea. And also, again, allowing them to leverage technology to the fullest is quite important. And if there are causes that resonate with the environment and education, even more powerful for these folks. And again, like before the previous generation, show appreciation for the work they do, for their efforts. That's important as well. It doesn't cost much to say thank you to folks, right? It can make a big difference, per se. And Generation Z. So video is key. Video is important. TikTok is out there. People know what TikTok is. Uh, Instagram is also very powerful, and even some of the YouTube stuff too. But with Meta and everything else that's out there, there's opportunities to leverage video. You can see right here, people have their VR headsets per se. I even have a VR headset here. I do work in the VR world, and one of the things is to be able to have content that can be used in it. I'm part of Generation X, but I understand that it's important to be able to work with content that can be shown in a virtual reality environment. We're doing this right now to help train folks to be able to perform surgery in the youngest kids out there, and make sure they could actually practice in a virtual environment before they actually have to cut into any flesh, right? So understanding different types of technology and leveraging that's important to this group. At the same time, making sure technology is great, but also the personal component. Make sure the relationships are authentic too. And they can tell the difference when you're being true or not true, right? Most people can tell the difference. Having experience that's customized. It's very important to have a customized experience to a person's need. And it's important to be able to listen carefully and see what really motivates people. And being able to customize your experience to their motivations is very critical. Giving them something to hold on to believe in. It's really important too. I think with any group, but this group means a lot. Again, the idea of video I talked about earlier, visual examples. Show some examples that are visual. Writing things down is fine, but maybe not as good as having some type of a visual example. Showing them how to do something, maybe hands-on, or even in a video would be great. And what's really important for this group is volunteerism is also an opportunity to build one's resume to show that they have work experience. So I'm sure a number of people are part of this generation, even Generation Alpha. I think there's some opportunities here to make a positive difference in this area. So, okay, so we talked about all these different quote unquote descriptions of people, but one of the things I want people to think about is that there are common threads across all these generations. In this group here, in this example, I think what they call this is called a Venn diagram. If you're not familiar with the term Venn, it's basically showing where there's a commonalities between different groups, and you can see in the middle of this diagram there's overlap here. So people, like I was saying earlier, I think people in general like to hear a sense of appreciation and thanks for what they do. And again, I emphasize, make sure you're clear on why you thank them. That's very important. We also need to realize that people are unique. Not everyone's the same. That's why we're different. That's why there's society with people with different perspectives in life. Trust me, there's so many different perspectives today that, making do of that is really important. Also there's a personal stage of life. Some people, even though they're part of a generation, they might be experiencing something different. So we need to understand that during the stage of life, there might be some challenges, there might be some different expectations. So again, what I presented earlier doesn't mean that's the way it's supposed to be. It's just a starting point, but get to know the person. And again, I use the word fluidity and flexibility. You need to be flexible in what you see here. Again, this is a guide point, but as you gain experience and understanding how the different generations work, things can pass from one to another, and the behaviors can can be seen in different generations. Again, this is the understanding that people are unique. Now, one of the things I bring up is, the more of the flip side, not the so fun part is that, when people might leave an organization, what are the challenges that people see? Well, challenges, recruiting, retention, or re-engagement. So what I'm saying is bringing people into an organization. Let's say the auxiliary Sea Scouts. Recruiting the right folks to come in, being out there. It's been a challenge for a number of groups. And then once they get recruited, retaining them, keeping them here, and making sure they're engaged. Again, things I talked about earlier that can help with regards to retention, and then re-engaging with folks. And sometimes if you haven't heard from someone in a while, maybe you want to go out and reach out to them and see how they're doing. And then why do people leave an organization? Well, one is like, why do people leave a job? Well, they may not feel they're valued. One of the main reasons why people might leave a job is their boss. Same thing if it's not their boss, it's the organization, is maybe they didn't feel valued. And one of the other things that I'm put in here are bad meetings. What do you mean by bad meetings? Well, if you go, let's say, to a meeting, Flotilla meeting, or any other meetings that you might have, if the meeting is not well orchestrated and well designed, and there's nothing really there, the concept of what I said earlier, what's in it for me, then if it's a bad experience, then why do people want to subject themselves to a bad experience? So it's important for you as a leader, part of an organization, to make sure that every time you have a meeting, it's a good one. So make sure you try to have a good event. And if you're a leader in any organization, it's important to have good, crisp meetings, have a good agenda, plan to move forward. And if things aren't going well, and you have enough wherewithal to recognize that, hey, maybe it's time to shift a little bit, get people engaged, be friendly. Again, and thank people again for coming to the meeting. It's very important that you're here because we have a chance to have a good and open discourse with each other. Okay, so what do I say here? So, right, having engaging meetings, right? How do you make members feel valued? Making sure tasks are matched with their skill set. So if the person's not really good with technology, then don't ask them to work on the website, or but ask them to do something else they're really good at. Or if someone is good with technology, well, give them the opportunity to spread their wings with that. Give training. If people need to learn how to do something, it's important to do training at a meeting. And at the end of the day, how does everything tie in together? Making members know in an organization that their work makes a difference. If they did something really well, let's say you go out to sea, and someone does it really well. Like they might, they're a lookout. They see something that hey, they saw something that prevented incident per se. Prevented a mishap. You need to let them know they made a difference. That might be a little overly dramatic, but if they do something really good that day, you want to thank them for that. At the same time, you want to make sure you trust them, and show that you trust in what they do. I think that means a lot. And there's some, nonverbal cues that would happen if you make sure you're able to do that. Gratitude, saying thank you, and just being thankful that we have an opportunity to be together to enjoy each other. I'm grateful for the opportunity to present to you all. Just having a chance to share this information means a lot, and hopefully you'll be able to put it to good use. And making sure you communicate. Keeping folks in the loop is very important. I would say in my world, communication can make or break an organization. So if you're able to communicate effectively and let people know what's going on, then that's the key. And one of the other things, I use this term called FAB. I used to be in sales, and one of the things you want to think about is the feature, advantage, and benefit. What I mean by that is it kind of goes back to what's in it for me. Let's say there's a specific thing, a specific event. Talk about this. Let's say an event that people should partake in. What's the key feature of that? Why would you want? And what is this event about? The advantages. Why does it make sense to go to this event versus any other event in their lives? Why is it better to come to it? And what's the ultimate benefit you get out of it? What's the ultimate, benefit for you? What's in it for me? If you go to this event, let's say you go to a training session on, you name it, and the benefit is you actually learn how to do something that you could apply in your life. Well, that's a good thing, right? So think of FABs when you talk to other people. This is not a opportunity to do any role playing or sales training, but sales folks think of the terms of FAB. If you talk to someone, you want a position, why something about this opportunity or feature? Why is it better for you to spend your time doing this or using this item? And then ultimately is what do you get out of it when you come home at the end of the day? Fam. And that's really my presentation today. So I'm gonna, uh, PJ, if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to you, and maybe if there's an opportunity for chat or questions, I'll be more than happy to take advantage of that.
All right. Well, thank you, Commodore Fajardo. I really liked a few of the things you said. That's a kind of a quick presentation, but really strong nuggets of wisdom out there for any organization. Particularly talking about making every meeting a good meeting. Such a simple statement, but there really is a lot to that. And valuing people's time and making people aware of why they're there. So something that kind of ties into that, and your acronym, the FAB, the feature, advantage, benefit. And in today's society, there's a lot of competing interests, right? Competition for time. Um, a general trend is, volunteerism generally is going down. Um, so in organizations like the auxiliary or the Sea Scouts, maybe you could be a little more specific with feature, advantage, benefit. Um, you know, how do we present this information so that it does stand out amongst all of the competing interests for people's time and attention?
Sure. No, I think it's, for me, yeah, usually these presentations tend to be like this presentation. I would have the opportunity to do in a larger group, so we could have back and forth discourse. So with that, I didn't have a chance to do as much discourse, but yeah, feature advantage and benefit. Like for example, what is probably, let me ask you this, feature. What is probably the most important activity, let's say, in terms of the world of the Sea Scouts, since the audience is with this world, is there anything you would want to tell me about that might be an important example? I could give examples. Like for me, I'm on marine safety side, so there's like
Sure.
why would no one get involved with commercial fishing vessel safety examinations? I mean, I could do that, but I could give that as an example. And then we could maybe build upon that for something else with regards to the Sea Scouts. So for me, one of the features of being part, and I have the commercial fishing vessel safety examination qualification, the PQS. I did that, and I have the opportunity to go visit, uh, at Hyde Street Harbor here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'll go visit the fishermen, help them make sure that their fishing vessel safety exams get done correctly and they're safe. So one of the features of me being able to do that, is I have a fun time getting a chance to maybe at lunchtime have a chance to go visit uh, yeah, fishermen, fisher people who've been out who go out in water. One feature is making sure that they I enjoy chatting with them. I mean, one of the features is to meet new people, right? And advantages, I can actually spend some time on the air, fresh air, on the water, chat with them about what they're doing, and the benefit for me is I'm learning about what they do, and I find out that it's a hard life, and it makes me appreciate what I do for a living. And there's someone out there who's like 75 years old on the water still; they're still fishing, and fishing is probably the most dangerous next to logging cutting down trees. Fishing is probably the most dangerous occupation in the United States today. I know a couple sort of people every year die in my area here fishing. So if I'm able to spend my time to help them make sure that their equipment is safe, I give them the right information, resources, and stuff, so they're safe. The advantage, is that for me, the advantage of me just sitting and is having a lunch and during lunchtime. The advantage for me is I'm actually making a difference for helping out others, and the benefit is hopefully I prevented the loss of life from them. So that's a benefit, really. So that's the way I look at it. It's not the most eloquent way of me putting it together, but that's the way I would position it. Right? Why would I want to become CF VSE and go out there and do that? Well, really, it's like it takes effort and time, but I think there are a lot of advantages. I deal with the active duty side too, and they're really fun to work with as well. The active duty Coast Guard, and they're really motivated and like auxiliaries too. But you have a different dynamic too. and you learn from others. And the benefit for me is, as an educator, I always like to learn something new every day. And every time I do this, I learn something new every day, which helps me keep my mind active and engaged.
And that is important to learn something new every day, isn't it? We're never done learning, are we?
Yeah, that's the thing is I don't think we're ever done. I think that's another thing people can think about from a leadership perspective is you want to learn something new every day, even from a professional development, personal perspective. That's important. Like one of my colleagues who's an examiner, she's what 92, 93. She doesn't go around as much anymore, but 10 years ago she was very active in radio.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm going to give kind of two different ways on this, and maybe have you comment on it. So as you're well aware, my experience in a flotilla too, um, particularly when the flotilla partners with Sea Scouts, you can have three, perhaps four different defined generations within one functioning unit, right? So that's one sort of example. And on the Sea Scouts, you're going to have the adult leaders, which I think a lot of your advice is very good for, um, say, for youth working up and how to communicate, as well as adult leaders, working the other way, communicating, right, to open that communication bridge. But even within the youth and Sea Scouts themselves, there's going to be, not maybe a generational difference, but still these sharp differences between, say, the 15-year-old and maybe the 19-year-old who is in a leadership position. I was wondering if you'd speak a little bit about mentorship, whether it's between, a vast generational difference, or if it's between, say, a teenage group, but you have defined leadership within that teenage group. Could you talk about maybe the roles of mentoring and how to develop mentoring programs? You know,
Yeah,
what's the benefit? How do we get that going?
that could be a challenge. And I think being a you know one of the things about mentorship and being a good mentor is you have to be leaders need to be cognizant, need to know that if someone who might be really good at their job or what they do right now, you'd think they'd be able to mentor people, but in reality, they may be able to do this one job really well, but it's important to be able to help coach someone. As I say, you want to get someone to be a good mentor. You also need to make sure that they are able to listen and understand people that they might be in charge of. Because finding good mentors, there are a lot of personal and professional characteristics that make a good mentor. Being able to listen, being able to put yourself and understand, let's say, where your mentees world has been, having that sense of compassion and understanding for what they're going through. And you just don't want to put someone who, let's say, has a lot of who's done a leadership role. You need to coach them to be able to lead by example. For example, one of my thoughts I like to use is the concept of being first, fair, firm, and flexible. And what I mean by that is by being able to say, well, leading from the front, we're first. Um, for fair, you have no favorites. You treat everyone at the same level. Firm, you establish the standards and you stick with them. And then being flexible, being able to understand that your way may not be always the right way. You need to be able to listen and hear people and say, you know what, that might be a better way. And if your approach is not the best way, not be afraid to admit that you might have they have a better approach. And if you make a mistake, don't be afraid to demonstrate that um, you made a mistake, because we're all human at the end of the day. And even the new leaders who are newly minted, they probably don't want to admit they made a mistake, but if they do it in the right way, people will appreciate that they are human. And I tell my team, I'm in my role as my role, I said, I don't know all the answers, and I depend upon you. And sometimes having a discussion where it may not be the most fun discussion for an hour because you're trying to hammer on trying to solve a problem, but at the end of the day, I tell people I'm confident at the end of our meeting we'll be able to solve the problem. We'll have some type of approach that we're going to follow. And in terms of leadership, I use it again, concept of first, fair, firm, and flexible. That's an important approach that I think that every leader should do. And it's served me well for a number of decades, that approach. And the other thing I look at in terms of a large leadership entity is I look like, you could have people, you could have materials or content, technology and financial components. This might be a little bit more strategic for this group, but one of the most important things I always say is you want to focus on taking care of your people. Your people are your most important resources. You could have a facility, a ship, or whatever. That's important, but really it's the people that are important, and being able to invest in their needs and their support. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of books on how to be a good mentor and such, but I really think it's being able to listen, having a sense of compassion, knowing that you treat them people with respect. You don't. I mean, I went to the Naval Academy. I know what it's like to yell at people. I know what it's like to be yelled at. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to be able to, you know, put yourself in the other person's shoe, TJ, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a good lesson that really the unit is the people, right? It's not the
Absolutely.
boat that you have in the Sea Scout ship or the flotilla or your access to on water facilities, right? It's the people and what you make of each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's the key. I hope I answered partially answered your question. I digress into a different area, but I think in mentoring, my first fair, firm, and flexible approach, I think, is an approach that one could use as a leader, and one could consider as being a mentor too.
Well, I think that's very good advice because, whether you're at my stage of life or a few decades back and you're in the Sea Scouts and you're trying to develop your leadership capabilities, the question is, well, where do I start?
Mhm.
And I think those principles, are, in personal conduct are a very good way to start for
And,
sure.
absolutely, I agree.
So I'm going to give you a situation that you might be familiar with or not, but throughout the Sea Scouts and Auxiliary, we have a partnership, right? The Sea Scouts are the official youth program of the auxiliary, and we have the um, across the country, we have some Sea Scout ships that are chartered by auxiliary flotillas and very good relationships building. But sometimes in trying to build new relationships where there aren't Sea Scouts and auxiliaries working together, there are misperceptions on both sides, preconceived notions. And this might go back to the generational information you're giving us. On one side, the standard flotilla in the auxiliary could look and say, you know, not recognize that these are young, capable people, but say, why would we want to work with these kids? And on the other side, these young, capable people might look at the flotilla and think the same thing, but in reverse. Why would we want to work with these old people? What do they have to offer? So do you have any tips on trying to overcome that barrier?
Yeah, that's a hard one.
That's
But
a hard
also,
it,
I think
it's a hard
one
one that
thing
we're
is to
working on
understand
across
that
the
people are
country.
people at the end of the day. And in many ways, when I talk to people who might be, let's say, my in-laws before they passed away, they might be in their 80s or 90s, and I ask them, "How do you feel? Do you feel like you're 80 or 90 years old?" "No, I still feel like I'm 40. I feel like I'm still young." So you have to go beyond the cover of the book, is the way I look at it, and understand that, why would I want to work with an older person? Well, you know what? They have a lot of knowledge that you don't have. And there's an opportunity to get some, again, the advantage, feature advantage, and benefit. Feature is they have a lot of knowledge. Advantage is, where else can you can learn about real life from someone. And the benefit is you can learn something very quickly that might prevent you from doing something silly in the future. I mean, they can tell you stories of what their life has been like, and how they avoided problems. I want to learn about it so I don't have to deal with it, and don't learn from someone's history. And the same thing with the older people too. Is some people, the younger folks, might have a different way of looking at things. And if you have an open mind and say, "Hey, there's another way to do something that might be faster. Maybe I could leverage, not to say technology is the answer for everything, but if you're able to show someone, hey, here's a faster way of doing something that they're, you know, you know, and it can save them oodles of time, that would be great." I mean, a crazy example right now. I know people have concerns about AI, artificial intelligence, but I work with that in my job, right? And there are a lot of people who are scared of it too. And I think people need to understand how it works. And if you were to even, let's say you're a person of a later generation from the younger folks, if you're able to understand how it works, maybe a younger person can show you how it actually operates. You might be able to save some time in your day if you're able to do it. Now, some people don't have a computer, some people don't need it, and that's fine. But I think the most important thing, PJ, what people need to think about is what are that Venn diagram where I show things for overlapping, right? I think it's important that people realize that people have a common interest. If you're in the Sea Scouts and you're, let's say, the auxiliary and or Sea Scout, have an opportunity to work together. Hopefully there's a common love of the sea, love of being on the water. So maybe having a chance to do some type of something on the water, something that would be cool, or the other activities that I think it's important to see if there's some common ground, some common activities. And again, the concept of the visual experience I talked about earlier, maybe they need to get together and do something hands on and do some type of activity together, some task of either getting underway, seeing what it's like to do that. And everyone will have a chance to work together on that. I think talking about it in a meeting is fine, but I think you need to follow it up with an actual activity where people can actually work together and maybe help man the lines, or coming into a docking evolution or something like that, or towing evolution. You can see how everyone works together, and I think once they see that older people hopefully know what they're doing, and the older people see the younger people who you can see that they really know what they're doing. They're able to do these drills really well. And here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, we have a number of the scouts come to Yerba Buena Island, sector San Francisco, the Coast Guard, the Coast Guard station, right, or even Coast Guard Island too. They have all these activities. They know how to do damage control. They know how to patch. When there's a leak. Aboard the ship, right, or the cutter, or the boat. You know how to patch those things. You know how to do pyrotechnics. You know how to do all these other activities. So I'm impressed with what Sea Scouts can do. And I think it would be crazy not to be able to work with them, because they bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm that might be able to invigorate a flotilla. And likewise, the flotilla has a lot of knowledge, or people there who know what they're doing, and hopefully the Scouts will see value of that. So I think people need to actually do things together and find some common ground to get to know each other. Does that make sense, PJ?
It does make sense. I really like you cut to the point where it's something hands-on.
Yeah.
It's going to help build those relationships and break down any kind of barriers. And that's, yeah, I've witnessed this with my own eyes across the country. Different sectors do safety at seas, where
Yeah.
there's active duty, there's auxiliaries, there's Sea Scouts working together, and some very successful introductions are some of the examples you gave, and doing more, doing things like vessel safety checks together. And sometimes what you see is in these hands-on activities, it gets to a point where there are very different people, but all working together as colleagues now. And when it gets to that point, you know that things are going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I see there's some questions in the chat. I can't see the chat. I don't know if I could just stop sharing my screen.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
let me see if I can. I can't even turn off my shop share. I don't know why, but that's okay. But anyway, I can see you all here. But anyway, yeah. I don't know if there's
Are there
anything in
any
the
other
chat.
questions? I thought this was, I mean, this is very good information, and our tech talk tonight is recorded, and flotillas and Sea Scout ships do come back to the YouTube channel to watch these and use portions as training. So, there's some profound insights I think that um, will definitely be helpful for training, whatever level people are at in developing their leadership capabilities. I'd like to end with one last thing, if you don't mind, Commodore Fajardo. Um, so I read your introduction, and you're a very accomplished person, right? But you weren't born a Commodore, and you certainly weren't born, vice president of education, and with the EDD, the doctorate. Um, at what point were you interested in becoming a leader? Right? Was this something you were always naturally inclined, leading the group when you were, say a boy back in school, or um, was it something that developed in the Naval Academy, or any insight, like, personally?
That's good. That's a good question. I think for me, you come from a family that you know came from overseas and wants to do really well. And my dad was in the Navy for 30 years. I think it's important to be able to help others. And I've always enjoyed, even in high school, I was what they call an emergency medical technician, EMT in high
Hmm.
school. I always wanted to help others. And at some time, you know, I was in leadership roles and I was in high school too, and helped lead different activities. And I made my share of mistakes. I admit it. I have no problem saying, I thought this is the way to do it, and oh, this is the way it's going to be. And you find out, well, no, no, that's not the way it's going to be, right? So the thing is that if I felt like I wanted to make a difference, help others. And my goal, I think, and even in high school, I thought it'd be important to be able to help lead things. Even in junior high too, I was doing various leadership activities. We know, and, doing some of the student government and such. And if you're able to help others find success, I think that's what I enjoyed. And as I did that, it helped me move into different roles and help. And having the patience and the humility to know you're not doing, it's not always the right way to do it, but if you're willing to listen, like I said before, I guess if you want to do that and find better ways to do things and synthesize other ideas, put things together in such a way that you could help lead a group. And it's difficult in many ways to be a great leader, but I learned from from things I learned I could do better every time. I think one of the most important things is that no one's perfect at the very beginning of any type of leadership experience evolution. I think I would rather, if I were a hiring manager, if I'm hiring people, I'd rather have someone who's able to pull themselves off of the bootstraps, learn from their mistakes, and be able to recover effectively, as opposed to someone who has perfect, straight A's and they never had a mistake in their life and they were all perfect. And, it's like the perfect picture of a resume in their background. If they have never had a mistake, never had a challenge they had to extricate or pull themselves out of, that's gonna be a challenge when something goes wrong. Whereas if you have someone who's not afraid to, go back and learn and stand back up after they might have gotten tackled, they shake it off and move forward. That's the type of person I look for. And same thing here is that in my life, I think, I never got everything I wanted, but how you react to it, how you relate to it, how you make yourself say, you know what, tomorrow's another day. Every day when you're at, let's say, at service academy, Naval Academy, for example, there were days when I said, this is, do I really want to do this every day? But you take one day at a time. Someone said to me, take each day at a time. And don't be afraid to, when you go to sleep, it's going to be a new day, and you just keep on going from there. So what I say is, as a leader, I've always felt I wanted to help others, and over time, I was given additional positions of responsibility, and I took them seriously, and I wanted to make sure I helped those around me. And at the end of the day, I think that's how it worked out well, PJ.
Well, that's outstanding. I really like your message of resiliency, and probably this thing to keep in mind for those of us that are being led, and as we all move through leadership positions, is you kept coming back to this idea of helping others and helping others succeed. And it seems like if that's what you're keeping first and foremost, you'll be taking care of your people. And these are the types of leaders that we like to be led by, and that those that we lead will appreciate, right? We help develop each other.
Absolutely. I mean, it's important to be able to, recognize that people are people. Every person that you deal with is a human being. I mean, they have the same feelings and they have the same experiences that you have. So, whether it doesn't matter what role they are, where they at. I always treat everyone who I see. I try to know everyone by my first name within my company when I see them in the hallway, whether they help work on the elevator or they help clean the head of the restrooms. I know the people who do that, and I know them I ask them how they're doing. I ask people who are my team, how's everything going? What are you gonna do for Thanksgiving? How's the family? And you spend time to listen and say, oh yeah, I remember this is what you used to do. I think people appreciate it. I'm not doing that because, oh, well, I'm doing that because I also want to learn too. I might learn something new too. Again, that's a benefit for me. So I just wanted to be able to be a sponge, and then if there's a way I could help someone, do you ever think about doing it this way? Someone might say, hey, I'm having a Dale, I'm having a challenge with this, or even, wherever I'm at, Mr. Fajardo, if I'm board a cutter, what do you think about this, right? It's something to, Commodore Fajardo, how would I handle this situation? People ask me what to do, and I try to see if I could help. And, I'm busy too, and sometimes I might make a mistake, and oh my goodness, I missed an email. But at the same time, I'm not afraid to say, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here, I missed that. Again, I'm human, we're busy, but if people are, again, treat each other with respect and listen to each other, that's so important. I think a lot of that is not happening today. Sad to see. I would say, maybe I'm not trying to make a statement here, but I think it's most important to really listen to others. People listen, and then also when you listen to someone, a good technique is to say, this is what I hear you saying. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard you say was this. And you want to repeat it, so at least they know you heard it, and also confirm that you're hearing it correctly, because sometimes someone might say something to you and you say, what? And were they trying to be, like even today, I had to call someone up about, they had sent something in a text to me, and I said, wait a minute, is something right here? And I said, well, why did this happen? And I call them up and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. I meant to say it this way. And again, it's important to listen. And if you don't know and you listen and it's not the right thing you're hearing, it's not afraid. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask even hard questions. I mean, I'll ask. My boss is a CEO. I ask him questions. I say, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me? And he said, oh yeah, this is what I meant to say. Oh, okay, thank you. I thought it was this way. Oh yeah, no, I didn't mean it that way. All right, fine. Or one of my folks on my team might say something like this, or I might hear you, but I'll double confirm, double check. A few minutes.
All right. Well, I think that's a great final word on leadership, being a good communicator up and down the chain, as well as being a good listener. Tuna, thank you very much, Commodore Fajardo, for joining us tonight and sharing your lessons on leadership and sharing some of the lessons that you've picked up along the way to help develop all of us that have tuned in tonight and that will see the video and hopefully make good use of the training. So for everyone, this is the final Tech Talk of 2024. On behalf of the Tech Talk team, Hire Muscovy, Peter Sargent, and myself, thank you for joining us this year as we explored many great topics. We wish you happy, safe holidays and look forward to you joining us again in 2025. Have a good evening, everyone.